Hello, it's your pal Brian from Perfect Circuit, and today we're going to talk about my favorite things, squares. We are looking at the OXI Instruments ONE. This is their first grid-based controller. It originally started as a Kickstarter. It is now available here at Perfect Circuit, and you can get your hands on one. There is a ton of connectivity here. You can not only attach MIDI, but you have 8 CV and 8 gate outputs, allowing you to control 8 separate, discrete, modular voices. The main way to interact with music using the OXI One is as a sequencer, but you're not limited to a traditional step-based sequencer. It has a bunch of different modes. You have, of course, your traditional monophonic sequencer. You have a polyphonic sequencer, you have a chord-based sequencer, and you have a stochastic random sequencer. And not only that, yo dog, we heard you like sequencers, so with the multi-track sequencer, we put 8 sequencers inside of your sequencer so you can sequence while you sequence. Up here on the screen, you can see that we have our pentamajor and C2. This tells you what the scale is, which you can choose by holding Shift and third button. And then this tells you what is the main root, the main tonic. In this case, C2. We have a very vanilla, very basic pentatonic major, C scale, because why not? It's easy. So when you press the keyboard view, you'll notice that only a few of these lights are illuminated, the other ones are red. This quantizes every button press to the selected scale in the selected key. So even if I were to press the red buttons, it pushes it up or down to the nearest note. This makes it very handy for just ham-fisting your controller and seeing what happens. Below that, we also have an arpeggiator mode. So when you press that, you get a bunch of different options as you would expect from any standard arpeggiator. You have, up, down, random, alternating, pinkies, converge. And so when we have the transport going, you get a very nice arpeggiator. The last mode we have over here on the left is an arrangement session view. This is where you can save or organize the patterns that you make for the sequences. Let's look at how we would do that. Up here I already have a couple that I already saved, but we're starting blank, we're starting fresh. And let's go back to the keyboard mode. And you might notice right here we have a nice circular button, which is a record button. So instead of manually putting in a sequencer, programming your steps, you can actually just play your sequence and it will quantize it to whatever division that you happen to have the track set to. So we arm it and play. One really cool and helpful feature you might notice is you see this little like pendulum going throughout the whole entire thing, and that is telling you where you are in the sequence and crucially what the timing, what the feel is. So even if you don't have a click going, you're not going to be completely lost. And this is present across all modes, so no matter where you're at, if you have the track recorded, you're always going to see this little pendulum, this little indicator, so you won't be lost whenever you are performing and whenever you are recording. So now we have a nice little sequence going, and of course if you wanted to, you can still add notes in automatically. Once we're out of the keyboard view, we're here looking at our sequencer mode, and you can actually just press a button, change the note over here, and it will always be quantized to the scale that you are in, just like our keyboard mode. And of course, for each note, you can go in, change the octave of it. And while we're in the keyboard mode, let's take a look at this column. This is our rolls column. So for all of these different modes, you can actually have a roll or a note repeat value, starting from fast here to slow down here. So this offers some really interesting ways to add more interest to a live sequence. The next sequencer mode we're going to look at is the chord mode. So when we open up our keyboard viewer, it looks very similar to the one in the polyphonic or the monophonic viewer. However, over here, these four are going to be have a slightly different effect. These first two rows right here change what type of chord, and these are actually diatonically correct chords. So whatever scale you have chosen, it's not just going to keep all the notes major. It's actually going to shift them, major, minor, minor, major, dominant, etc., to adhere to whatever scale you happen to be using. And it's also going to show, very interestingly, the different types of scale variations that would work depending on which note you're playing. So let's start with the most basic chord formation right here at number 1 and press our C and see what happens. If you look up here, it says C major, no inversion. It's just your basic C major chord. If we go up, we have a C6, C major 7, and a whole bunch of different chord variations that are just a hoot to play with. The next mode we're going to look at is the stochastic mode, which is a random pitch, random rhythm, random note melody generator that, like everything else, is affixed to the scale and the root note that you set to it. Here we have some sort of weird bar graph looking thing, but if you also notice at the bottom, there are slight darker red areas, and that, just like our keyboard viewer, is indicating notes that are not in our scale. What these little bars mean are how likely the stochastic generator is to play that particular note. Over here, this is where we affect the randomization properties. last sequencer mode we're going to look at today is the multi-mode sequencer. This gives you 8 monophonic sequencers on just one of these tracks. You can assign any of them to be any MIDI channel or CV output. So that means even though it is 8 monophonic, nothing's stopping you from having 3 on the same channel for your polyphonic synth and then sequencing each of the different intervals or chord tones separately. So let's take a look at how that works. In our keyboard view, and this is the view that we've been going to because it is the core of how you're going to interact and create your sequence. In the keyboard view here, it looks very similar. We have different patterns that are tied to different scales. However, the difference here, just like in our chord sequence mode, is the 4 columns over here on the right. So you get a solo track, you get a mute track, you get an arm track, and then we still have this roll track right here. So right now if we play something, nothing is armed. So this is very helpful if you want to create on-the-fly arrangements and you have different types of sequencers. So that means you're not just limited to using the pattern or arrangement mode. You can actually have different types of patterns, but then live and dynamically trigger, solo, and play different notes over top of them. So let's take a listen to what we have right here. But wait, there's more. Not only can you use it to control your DAW and your MIDI devices, but here, our setup right now is taking advantage of the 8 CV outs, 8 CV gate outputs, and not only does the CV output give you volt per octave or pitch data, it can also be used as an envelope or an LFO to give you extra sources of modulation. Let's briefly look at the CV capabilities of the OXI One. As I mentioned before, there are 8 CV outputs, 8 gate outputs. The CV outputs are not limited to note and pitch data. They can actually send out envelopes. They can also send out LFOs. So this is very important if you have a smaller modular system. If you have just a few semi-modular pieces, you're not limited to whatever you have in the box. You actually can use this as a modulation source as well, which is very handy for a compact setup. Right here, I have the East Beast, the West Pest, just getting a couple little note values from the OXI. What does it sound like? It sounds like this. It's cool. The roll function still works, and it's really neat. Particularly if we are working in a monophonic patch, such as this. Mostly because you can just get some really weird sounding stuff very easily, and it's locked into the tempo, which is also pretty cool. So this is the OXI. It is also battery powered. You might notice only patch cables are plugged in. This thing I've been working with for the better part of the past 2 days, and I have not had to charge it. It's fantastic. You can take it with you anywhere. It's portable. It's truly the centerpiece of any electronic musician's toolkit. So there you have it, another delightful square device that I got to touch and make weird sounds with the virus. The OXI Instruments One is a really helpful sequencer, controller, perfect if you have Eurorack equipment, perfect if you have MIDI stuff, perfect if you don't have any of that and you're just looking for something to plug into your computer using your DAW, using any sort of software that you might have, and perform with it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Be sure to like and subscribe, and keep hitting us up about things that you want to see. Do you have questions? Let us know. Do you have nice comments? Put them right below us. Be sure to treat yourself right today. See ya.